Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. And perhaps the word exploration is apt for this title that I'd like to speak about today, because I would like to talk about a title which already currently exists in the Criterion Collection at spine number 54. But this year, on this occasion, we see Criterion release or re-release this title, taking advantage of the 4K UHD format. I'm speaking of a work that is from the filmmaker Reinert, and it is from 1989. And the name of the work is For All Mankind. This is the extraordinary work, which is like a catalog, a documentary, a gathering, a collection of footage, a celebration of NASA, National Aeronautics Space Administration in the United States, also a celebration of the act of human endeavor, which can take human beings far off into space, and for purposes of space exploration, also lunar landing, and also exploration of the moon, and what that encompassed in the context of the Apollo missions, again with NASA. And all of this is here, and it's embodied here in terms of footage, in terms of spirit, in terms of energy, in terms of atmosphere, and in terms of a type of cinematic visual expression, a treat for the eyes and ears, in fact, the whole senses. And indeed, this is also a sharing of those experiences of being out and about, beyond, as it were. And indeed, what a thrilling experience this is. This is the work which is For All Mankind. Now, let us take a step back and say that, so we understand from, say, how this film has been described, say, in film reviews or discussions or essays, including, I should say, too, the supplemental features that can be found with this particular Criterion release, and we'll get to those momentarily. We understand that Reinert essentially took the great footage that was shot during these specific space missions, the Apollo space program, and took these various footages, or these various sets of footage that were shot by the astronauts that were in those specific missions. Because what happened was, after a mission, or during a mission, say, or prior to a mission, the astronauts that would be part of that mission would be training, and part of that training would also be handling camera work, because camera work would be very essential for purposes of after mission study, for purposes of posterity, for purposes of also keeping alive this type of, say, record for current and future generations to explore. And so this footage was part of, say, the mission training process. And also, we understand, too, that the astronauts on each of these missions would, or these programs, would also choose what types of things to shoot. They would also have some maybe individual input, in the manner of speaking, also depending on the make of the mod, or the make of the ship, or the dimensions of, say, the size of the windows, or the nature of the mission itself, because not all the missions were always the same per se, but still, based on those specifics, then we'd have different, say, or potentially different shots of, say, footage, say, taken in orbit, or taken, say, during launch, or taken, say, within the actual vessel itself, or say maybe when we get to the missions that involve lunar landing and also lunar surface exploration, also shots of the moon surface, also shots of landing, and also liftoff back to the return to home, etc. So there are various stages or progressions that are captured on film for each of these missions. And then what we understand happened was that this film was then, through a specific set of procedural circumstances, then returned to Earth, returned to the surface, and then was retrieved, and then was then handled and very carefully by NASA, say, preservation and archiving specialists, to then be prepared, say, copies, and those copies would then be treated in, say, a general distribution network, such as, say, use for general public broadcasting or the like, or showing the general public. But we'd have the original footage, the original film, that would be stored, in essence, under very tight, say, circumstances, temperature controlled circumstances, essentially in a vault in NASA. So that would all be in a vault, but then we'd have these general, say, copies that would be generally made available in public circulation, and that's where we get maybe understanding or watching on the news, or watching in, say, various documentaries in the past, say, of the lunar landing and the like. So, but what happened was that Al Reinert really saw, or was able to understand and explore this actual footage that was stored in the vault, because he understood that on one hand we had so many copies of certain specific moments of this film, but we didn't necessarily, as members of the general public, see all of the footage that was actually shot. We had seen maybe only a select portion of that footage for purposes, as I say, of general circulation, but that wasn't necessarily showing what all the film had to offer, at least according to Al Reinert. And then another thing too was that the stuff that would be in circulation would not always be of the highest quality, because it might be, we're talking about not the original film, but we're talking about copies of the film. And in that sense, because we're talking about circulation, we're talking about copies of copies of copies potentially. Which, as one knows, the further we get from the original with more copies, the more potential there is for a downgrading, say, of visual quality, in a manner of speaking. So with these, say, set of circumstances or parameters in mind, what Al Reinert did here, with the cooperation of NASA and with the cooperation of many of, say, the astronauts who are also making themselves available, he took this footage from all of these various missions, the space program, the NASA space program, and he edited them together in a way that is this tableau spectacle. We have a work for all mankind that is not specifically, say, a step-by-step historical narrative documentary about the history of, say, the Apollo space program. That's what we're getting at all here. Or not, I shouldn't say it all. Well, that's not necessarily what we're getting directly. So we're not getting, say, a chronological explanation of the progress or the evolution or the history of, say, the NASA space program leading up to the specific lunar landing and the lunar surface exploration. That's not what we're getting per se. What we are getting is this type of tableau of an impression, of a feeling of exploration, of the feeling of being in space, of the feeling of seeing the Earth, the planet Earth, from space, from orbit, in this majestic way, but using various footage from various missions, but editing them together in a way that seems seamless. And so in that way, we're getting an impression of, say, the entirety of this NASA space exploration program, using footage that kind of can go basically back and forth from mission to mission to mission to mission, essentially. But we still get in that wonderful, magical, cinematic way, we get this sense of, say, an overall breadth of scope and continuity. We get the impression of, say, the idea of being in space. We might get in a pure cinematic sense, or say a technical sense, we might get this maybe footage from one mission, then suddenly edited into footage from another mission from a different year, for example, in a different ship, in a different, say, set of circumstances, a different crew, etc. So, but the edit does not necessarily feel jarring. The edit, in fact, gives a sense of continuity because maybe the first shot has something to do with a shot of Earth from orbit, and then the second shot from a different mission still is, in a sense, continuous because it is also, from that mission's perspective, also a shot from the vantage point of orbit, looking down onto the planet's surface or looking down onto planet Earth. So there is that sense of continuity that goes forward, even though we might be jumping from mission to mission to mission. But that, I think, adds a sense of, say, the majestic quality, the grand sweep of things. Also, we have to keep in mind, too, that this is showing us in what has to be, or what is regarded as being sort of the ultimate highest quality of the film itself. This is showing us in this beautiful presentation, this beautiful way, this exhilarating feeling. And we hear the words of the astronauts overlaid onto the soundtrack as we watch these scenes unfold. And sometimes we do go back and forth. Sometimes we jump from mission to mission to mission. So there is that sense of, maybe for those who are very much experts in, say, NASA history, one might immediately recognize, oh, this is from one mission, this is from the other mission, this is from that mission, etc. So we get that footage. We also get footage from mission control, etc. When you hear the words of the astronauts speaking, while we see the footage, the NASA footage, display itself and present itself for us, the viewers, to witness and watch and be enthralled by. So we get that sense. So I should say here that we have this majestic sweep that, from the vantage point, say, of someone who is very well versed in NASA history, I think one can maybe identify what shot belongs to what mission. And I think when we get to the commentary track, which is also carried over, included with this current 2022 release, we do get that sense as well from the members of the commentary track. So on the one hand, however, on the other hand, for those who might be quote unquote casual viewers, those who might not necessarily be expert when it comes to NASA history. So for instance, like myself, I don't know the specifics of the various missions. So I can't identify with ease which shot belongs with which mission. So even from that vantage point, I can still appreciate and get so much from this, because I've never been to space, and I will never be in space, and I will never have that direct feeling of what it is like to be in space. So this documentary, therefore, I think gives me that taste, that feel, and gives me that access into the world with footage of people that were actually there. And so there is that closeness, if you will, that step, that feeling of proximity, if you will, between myself from the vantage point of the viewer, and then also the participants in these wonderful, historic, epic, history-making explorations in space. So even from the casual viewer's perspective, when I say that, I mean someone who, like myself, who's not well versed in the history of NASA, I get so much out of this, and I'm enthralled all the time. And I should point out, too, that the Criterion Collection release does assist with, say, someone like myself who might not necessarily be well versed in the history of NASA and the history of these various missions, because it does provide options to be able to follow along, optional, say, subtitling options and the like, and we'll get to that later about how we can still follow along with which shot actually belongs to which mission. So we can also get a sense of where we are in the actual specific moments in time, even at the same time while we are enjoying the grand epic sweep the brushstrokes of, say, human endeavor, in a manner of speaking, so, which I think is a part of the philosophy of how and why and the structure upon which this work by Al Reinert for all mankind was constructed and conceived and ultimately created. So there is so much of the majesty, the sweep, the epic nature, the type of the emotional uplift and the feeling of, say, a type of uplift and buoyancy, and also the joy that is this being able to witness achievements of human endeavor in the context of exploration of space and beyond. And it's captured here with such loving detail, with the footage from NASA, and edited so remarkably, and with the application of music as well. And we'll get to that too, as its music is also very a delicate and poignant part of this, to create this wonderful, grand impression and expression and celebration of the power of human endeavor in the context of the exploration of space. This is the work for all mankind. The Criterion Collection has released or re-released this film into its physical media catalog. The film is For All Mankind, and it's at spine number 54. And on this occasion, in the year 2022, it is now relying on the 4K UHD format options. So before, for example, in an earlier release, this is the Blu-ray edition from 2009, the first printing. So this was released earlier. It had other releases in the Criterion Collection prior to this 2009 Blu-rays, Blu-ray release, I should add. But then now we have here, a little bit over 10 years after this first printing, we have now this release or re-release, now taking advantage of the 4K UHD format. I should point out too, just in case, that it is a 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. And so what we have is two discs. One is the 4K UHD disc and the other being the Blu-ray disc. And then here we have the compartment that would hold the booklet. I've just taken the liberty of removing the booklet prior to the start of this video discussion. So, but there we have this. This is a 4K release, 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo release using this plastic casing. So just keep that in mind. I'll maybe mention a little bit about that in the closing moments of this video discussion. I should point out, first of all, though, that about the 4K UHD presentation, we have something that's a number of things that are very interesting going on here. So let me just read from the booklet here about the presentation or the restoration. For all mankind, For All Mankind is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.33 to 1. On the 4K Ultra HD disc, it is also presented in the alternate 1.85 to 1 theatrical framing. The 1.33 to 1 picture reflects the 16mm compositions as captured by the NASA astronauts and mission control, and has been slightly window boxed to ensure that the maximum image is visible on all monitors. Based on the late producer-director Al Reinert's previous supervision and approval, this new digital transfer was created in 4K resolution, etc. Then, speaking about the soundtrack, the original 5.1 surround soundtrack was mastered from 35mm magnetic tracks. On the 4K UHD disc, the feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR, high dynamic range. On the Blu-ray, it is presented in high definition SDR, standard dynamic range. So this is purported to be a new 4K digital restoration for purposes of this new release here. So this is kind of, in that way, one of the, I think, big selling points of this new release. That's not to say anything bad about this Blu-ray. I think this earlier Blu-ray, was very excellent, is very excellent. But we have something quite great here, in my view. This is a real wonderful way in which Criterion and company are taking advantage of the 4K format. I mean, it looks spectacular. It looks really spectacular and bold and vivid and sharp. And I, even with my own I admit, very say, amateur, inexperienced eye when it comes to the details of, say, presentation and video display and the like. I got so much out of it. I was so captivated by it that I was very, very overwhelmed with the 4K UHD experience that is on offer here for the Criterion release. So bravo for this. Now, also in that vein, I should point out too that, as was indicated in this excerpt from the booklet, we have for the Blu-ray, I'm sorry, for the 4K UHD disc, we have the option too of the 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio, or the sort of horizontally wider 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio, the latter of which, according to the supplements and the information here, being for the theatrical presentation. Now, for the Blu-ray that's included here, and also I should point out for the Blu-ray that was included, that was part of the earlier release, it was the 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio. And I think we can take the 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio and consider it to be maybe a quote-unquote, say, authentic take and feel, because according to the information, this is in keeping with how the footage was for purposes of the NASA astronauts filming, etc. So I think in that way, the 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio experience is in many ways the way to go in terms of, say, a quote-unquote, again, I use the word authentic, but I think it's a reasonable use of that word, and it's great to have that option. That being said, there's, again, something very magical and majestic about having the 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio being made available for purposes of the 4K UHD presentation. Again, not for the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray, we're getting only the 1.33. I say only. It's still great. It's still great. But to have that extra option and to see it expanded in that way, there is something, wow, amazing. And I've never seen this in the theater. I've never had the fortune of seeing it in the theater, so I don't know what that experience is like, and maybe I will never have that opportunity in my own lifetime. But if that is indeed the case, that I won't be able to see this in the theater, at the very least, I can say that I saw it also for in the context of this new Criterion release. I was able to see it in this theatrical aspect ratio presentation, and indeed, to my eye, there is some information on the sides that seems to be included more in that wider theatrical presentation than, say, in the 1.33. Again, that's to my eye. I haven't done a shot-by-shot comparative analysis of the entire film, but based on certain excerpts that of my own choosing, it looks as though there's some slightly more information made available in the 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio presentation. But again, not to take anything away from the 1.33 presentation. I think that's great. That is perhaps the standard to rely upon. That's the way to go in many ways. And again, if you have the Blu-ray or you're not relying, say, on the 4K UHD, that is still, you're getting your money's worth, believe me. But again, for those who are into the 4K UHD format, you're getting that option. So wow, bravo, well done. It's wonderful to have that here for purposes of this presentation from Criterion. Now, when we go to the supplements, we should talk about two distinct things here. So first, let's talk about the commentary track. Now, we can watch the film either on the 4K UHD disc or the Blu-ray disc, and while the supplement features themselves will be found only on the Blu-ray portion for purposes, I think, of size and space made available on the disc itself, the supplemental menu is on the Blu-ray disc only, and we'll talk about that momentarily. We can watch the film on either disc with the optional commentary track. So the commentary track is from 1999, and this is with Al Reinert and Eugene Cernan, or Gene Cernan. And this is great because Gene Cernan is a very experienced NASA astronaut, being himself a mission commander, Apollo 17, and then also, of course, Al Reinert and his experience as the filmmaker, as a type of journalist, archivist, and documentarian in many ways, and also, of course, in many ways the filmmaker behind this work for all mankind. So we have the two of them together in this 1999 commentary track. It is a wonderful commentary track, by the way. Please check it out if you can. It's a it's a type of I mean it's what commentary tracks are they're designed to do, is that they are designed to have that feel of a nice, maybe a casual conversation. There's a great rapport there. There's a great type of accessibility in the air in their comments when they speak, and yet at the same time, it is so filled with information galore. It's great. Maybe one can say, as a type of general classification, that Gene Cernan's comments might tend more towards the specifics of the NASA astronaut flight program, mission command history, and the like. So when we get certain specific shots or scenes, he can tell us what the details are as to what mission this refers to, what shot goes with what mission, what are the differences between the two, what are the differences between what missions, what were the circumstances regarding the use of this shot, that shot, in the context of the, say, the trajectory of NASA history. So that's really good. While at the same time, Al Reinert's comments might be said in general, in terms of a general classification, could be talking about the filmmaking component, the filmmaking aspect, the choice of editing, say, certain clips together, or maybe there's a particular shot that is a little bit of a quote unquote cheat, if you will, and he is the first to acknowledge this. And so, but he had to explain, or he explains why the need for a particular shot was needed, although it might not necessarily have reflected the actual flight mission itself. But again, it's a very brief shot. It doesn't last very long, and I think it does have a certain consistency. And indeed, Al Reinert is very fair and reasonable in mentioning, but that's just one moment in, I think, a grand commentary track where he talks about I mean, it's a brilliant commentary track. So it's great that it's been carried over from, as I say, the late 1990s, 1999 into this current iteration from Criterion. And the other points that they talk about is, of course, they talk about the history of the NASA program, the Apollo missions, President John F. Kennedy, and of course some of the key figures in the program, and the astronauts: Alan Bean, Buzz Aldrin, Dave Scott, John Young, Charlie Duke, James Irwin, Dick Gordon, etc. Incidentally, we do have a list of the astronauts that are for each of the missions, and on one of the pages of the booklet here, which we also saw earlier, which is a really great thing. But we also acknowledge, or the people here on the commentary track acknowledge, the great commitment and expertise and intelligence of the astronauts, the pilots, the astronauts that were involved. Also, Cernan does mention too, maybe there's a little bit of a competitive streak between and among them, which served the group really well. It really made people excel and want to be at their very best, at their very height, which is what one needed in order to be able to be fully trained enough to go, be qualified to go into space. So this is another great option here. Also, it's interesting too, there's a little bit of a discussion about the type of, say, psychology, the type of personality traits that one might have had, or that might have been common among these astronauts, these highly trained astronauts. Maybe they had a certain type of upbringing, or maybe there was a type of they wanted to excel, and they really were very much self-motivated in terms of their studies and the like, and wanted to excel in their own. So there's, in that way, I think, a very healthy type of competitive streak that is mentioned here. But then that's also very needed. And then we also get comments to, again, Reinhardt in particular speaks about what the differences are. Again, this is a juxtaposition of various Apollo missions together, including, for example, Apollo 13, the Apollo 13 mission. And it is, in part of the film, it is alluded to in terms of what happens on the Apollo 13 mission, and how, say, specific circumstances involving that mission seem to come about, and what the reaction was, and mission control and the like. So that's another way to say that we do get a type of trajectory and certain bits of information and circumstances that might be specific to one mission over the other. And we also get, say, shots from the ground, mission control and the like. But also, at the same time, the film is not structured in a way to focus specifically on the chronological development of NASA's history in that way. So it's not a cataloging of the entirety of the Apollo program per se, but it's just one stop along this, say, collage or impressionistic combination of these shots. And so, but in that way, we get the details of what the differences were in terms of, say, for instance, Saturn and the makeup and the Gemini and the even down to the size of the windows and how that might have made a difference in terms of the types of shots that would be employed for shooting the planet Earth from the Earth's orbit, etc. And the like, and so, and also the idea of feeling and sounds, and also the idea too of shooting at a certain type of frame rate, because another thing that the astronauts, as revealed in the commentary track here, the other thing too about the astronauts and what they were trained to do is not just to use the camera, but also think about frame rate, think about speed, because that might have to do with, say, the conservation of limited amount of film stock that they had on hand. So that might have changed the way in which a particular, say, image appears in terms of the frame rate or speed rate. So that's also very interesting. And then they speak too about this is again the idea, especially Al Reinert is talking about how he's talking about these specific missions, and they are distinct, but it's all presented or structured in a way to remove these distinctions, which I think is a very strong philosophical, cinematically philosophical point. And indeed, in keeping with that, there's a way in which that type of structure lends itself very naturally and very nicely to a viewing of this film as a type of spiritual experience, as a type of celebration of the scope of the promise and wonder of the power of human endeavor. And indeed, when one thinks about that, there is a very spiritual, not necessarily, it could be religious, but not necessarily religious, but spiritual in the sense also of a real humanistic sense of triumph and celebration. And I love that discussion. The discussion in the commentary track does go into that territory, I think, very wonderfully and very naturally and organically. So for those and other reasons, I think this commentary track is well worth it. I mean, other reasons too, they talk about the use of music. You know, Brian Eno's musical score is very famous and very important, and they speak here about how, for instance, they needed a special type of music, a modern synthesizer score type of music, and I love the phrase here: music that would speak for the moon. Wow. And so I think that is just a testament to the power of the music that's used. I mean, it's used here. It's almost ubiquitous in the sense that it has so much reach across cultures and across different media and platforms. But it's right for all mankind. It's again music that speaks for the moon. I love that. And also the idea of the history making. As we see it in this footage, the exploration of space, the exploration of the moon, and the idea too of there's this idea of a great juxtaposition of what the moon actually is in terms of geology, and maybe there are in terms of minerals and the like, and maybe it has a sense of, and from a point of view of a geological importance, maybe there, bits of rock or something, according to Cernan and company. However, as an image, as a symbol, again, this is also according to Cernan, there is this idea of the moon being alive and being spiritual and being grand and majestic. I find that to be such a powerful statement from these two gentlemen. So well done for being able to include this or carry it over from past releases and to have it here again to be made available for all to see. So I strongly recommend checking it out if you can, the film with the commentary track. It's really wonderful. And so now let's focus in on the supplemental features that can be found with this release. As mentioned before, the supplemental features will be found on the Blu-ray disc, not on the 4K UHD disc, but on the Blu-ray disc. So just keep that in mind. And the commentary track will be found on both, but for the supplemental menu, you'll go to the Blu-ray disc. And this is something that we've actually seen in the prior 2009 release. So we do have some continuity in terms of the supplemental materials. So what do we have now carried over it with this 2022 release, again on the Blu-ray component? So first off, we have the making of documentary, which is called An Accidental Gift. This is the making of For All Mankind from 2009, approximately 32 minutes. And here we have the great making of background divided into these chapter subcomponents, which is very nice. Again, talking about the approach to the film, the genesis for the film, and the footage, the NASA footage, which is also spoken about in the, for example, in the commentary track, and also the way in which the film is preserved, and also based on those conditions, what Al Reinert wanted to do with the Genesis, which ended up becoming this great film For All Mankind. So we also get a little bit of insight into the vault and the low cold temperatures required, and the film editors, and also the vault curator and the librarian, and all these details, again, to show and to provide respect and celebrate the fact that this is a film that is focusing in on a key component of NASA history, as well as a key component of U.S. space exploration history, U.S. cultural history, U.S. history, and also world history and human history. So it's great to have this great celebration here. Also, in this documentary, we have other ideas here. The technology of photography is mentioned, and also the idea of the astronauts wanting to document their voyages, their travels, in order for a preservation, for scientific study, and also for the joy of sharing these images that are directly experienced by a very few select persons on the world. You know, not everyone gets a chance to explore space and go to the moon. So to have these images that can then be shared with people across the globe, I think makes this film, or makes this footage extremely important. Also, the word accidental is used in the title of the documentary An Accidental Gift, and I think that is due to many things, one of which being the fact that it is acknowledged that for a lot of these astronauts, they were, during their mission, they decided what would they shoot, what would they film. And so sometimes the images that would come out, these extraordinary images, might have come out due to some sort of quote unquote accidental set of circumstances, which makes it even more amazing, and makes us, understand and remind us and wonder at the splendor of human endeavor, like human endeavor to be able to go to the moon, to go into space, but also human endeavor to be able to create these images and to have these images captured for all eternity, based in many instances on chance, on choice, on a whim, which is amazing, which makes it even all the more a type of human, if you know what I mean. And that's really great. And also there's a mention too about how this is linked to the trajectory of the United States political history of the 1960s. So going to the moon as also a type of political statement was also in the air, also something that's very significant in the history of the Apollo program, of NASA, etc. But also there is this idea of the celebration of as I say, the wonder of the boundless energy of human exploration. And so also Reinhardt talks about how he had known about the footage prior to making the film For All Mankind, prior to getting the idea for the film, but he had known about the footage and exploring it and examining it for years, and then of course trying to bring it together, and bringing it together in a way that would also be a wonderful presentation of the work. As mentioned here and also elsewhere, what often was the case was the actual footage would then be there would be copies made, and then those copies would then be further subjected to copies. So copies of copies of copies would then be part of the general circulation, say shared with news outlets, the public, libraries, and the like. But the actual footage itself would then be stored in order for optimal preservational circumstances or situations. But it was for purposes of all mankind that this actual footage was made available in order to create this ultimate experience. So in many ways, these scenes, although they might have been seen, say, on the news or on other documentary footage, this is really in many ways the first time seeing the actual images with a direct connection to the footage rather than a copy of a copy of a copy. So I think that is a really great thing indeed. And also it shows too that not all of the footage was made available to the public. And this Al Reinert does remind us about this, that a lot of the footage was still unseen. And so this film, For All Mankind, would be an opportunity to get a chance to see some of this footage that was never made available to the public. So that's another great thing about this too. Also, Alan Bean, talking about using the camera during flight, the astronaut using the camera itself during flight. And also the idea of what the film does and how the film is then transported back to the Earth's surface, and then how it's retrieved and then stored for preservation, etc. And then the processes involved for this, which is a very important process otherwise, because film is very fragile. And one wrong move could mean exposure that could destroy the actual stuff. And that is something that is that must be avoided at all costs in terms of film preservation. So these procedures must be adhered to very strongly, and that's what they have done in these circumstances. And then the idea too of the film. Why are the films? Another reason for the films being made, again, for scientific research purposes, also for diagnostic purposes, maybe to shoot during a flight in order to see what problems arise, and therefore to try to use it as a diagnostic exercise or problem-solving exercise, which is very important. And then also talking about the reaction to the film, the general reaction to the film. It was a praiseworthy, laudatory, wonderful reaction, as well-deserved, and that reaction continues to this very day, even up to the present day, my dear friends, 2022, with this current Criterion release. So all in all, this is a great documentary. If you haven't checked it out already, here's your chance, my dear friends. An Accidental Gift from 2009, approximately 32 minutes. And that's not all, because then we continue on with it's called On Camera, from 2009. And these are on-camera interviews, a collection, compilation with 15 Apollo astronauts and their experience of a lifetime, totaling approximately 20 minutes. And it's from various sources. The Wonder of It All, Jeff Roth, The Other Side of the Moon, Mickey Lemley, and Our Planet Earth, also the same. And then also two events celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 7 mission and the Apollo 8 mission, respectively. So these interviews, on-camera interviews, are then compiled here for purposes of this segment On Camera, again from 2009. 20 minutes. This is very important and very great too, because for those of you who've seen For All Mankind, you know that the interviews that we hear are audio, and they're part of the soundtrack, but we see the footage, but we hear the speaking, which is a really great thing indeed. But it's not a documentary where we see on-camera interviews per se. So in that way, it's a different type of documentary experience. However, it is always nice to get a sense of who these people are, who these individuals are. And so for those who want to get more of that sense, here is your opportunity if you haven't seen it. So therefore, we have this supplementary segment, which in many ways serves as a wonderful supplement or complement to For All Mankind, in that we do get the actual on-camera interviews or discussions from these various, say, films or various events and the like, again, gathered together for purposes of this. So wonderful, wonderful stuff. So please check this out if you can. This is, again, approximately 20 minutes. And then the next supplement is, well, we mentioned earlier about the astronaut, Alan Bean. And Alan Bean is from Apollo 12. And here he is talking about this, or in the supplement, he's giving a discussion here, paintings from the moon. He is the fourth man to have walked on the moon. I'm sorry, this totals about 7 minutes. And he was also a test pilot. He talks about his experience as an astronaut, Skylab commander, etc. And then also a very fascinating life indeed, for many reasons, one of which is highlighted here, which is that in his days after being a pilot and astronaut, he turned his attention to painting and the arts. And when he says he retired from NASA, and he decided that he wanted to be a painter. He wanted to study painting, and he had that really interesting and unique cross section of background and gifts. He was a very talented painter, and he was one of the few people on the planet who went to the moon. So to have these two cross currents combining in this way makes for a very interesting and fascinating career as a painter, because here he talks about little things. He talks about the images that he has for purposes of his own painting works. But that's not all, because then I didn't realize this, but he also talks about the use of the I didn't realize this until I first saw this supplement. When I first saw it upon the initial Blu-ray release, it was fascinating to me. It still remains fascinating to me, which is the use of some of the materials. You know, as an astronaut, he was able to say bring home some of the little things, some of the little trinkets. That being an astronaut, you know, you have your perks, as it were. As going to the moon, you have your perks, and so you have little bits of dust, space dust or moon dust, that he says he integrates into some of his works, or the little piece of foil or cloth or something. Fascinating. Not just the painting, but also the actual materials that are integrated into his works, that are depicting the moon and depicting space flight, etc. Wow, what a fascinating individual, what a fascinating character, what a fascinating man. So this is Paintings from the Moon. So it's a discussion with Alan Bean, approximately 7 minutes. And then that's not all, because then the supplements continue with NASA audio highlights, 21 sound bites in all, totaling approximately 6 minutes. And this is very important too, because these are the sound bites from various missions that have been recorded for all time, for all posterity. But here we have them gathered here. So, and a number of them are, you know, they have been, I think they're very, very famous indeed. But to have them here in these segmented sound bites is fascinating. So here we have another aspect of history, again linked to For All Mankind, linked with NASA, linked with the NASA space programs. So wonderful, wonderful. And then we have 3, 2, 1 blast off. And this is a kind of a short 2 minute 2 minute maybe a video like montage, if you will, gathering footage of liftoffs. Rocket boosters, NASA rocket boosters and liftoffs, you know, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Skylab. And so part of the aspect of the fascination of this work is the technology and the crafts and the ships and the vessels and the boosters and the like. This is a very important aspect. So we have this little expert, another link to history, another link to the programs, another link to the film. So wonderful stuff. Please check it out if you can. Again, approximately 2 minutes. So that concludes the supplement section. So we have supplements. Again, if you have the earlier Blu-ray, you'll recognize those supplements. But again, if you're watching this for the first time or getting this for the first time, great stuff. Please check out those supplements if you can. Also, I should point out that just like the earlier Blu-ray, we have a great booklet. It's robust, it's stapled, and it has a number of things. It has, as I mentioned too, the list of the astronauts for each of the Apollo missions. It has credits, of course, and it has the essay Fantastic Voyage, Terence Rafferty essay, and wonderful pictures to boot. And then also it has A Trip to the Moon by Al Reinert. So we have these writings, which are brilliant, splendid, which are carried over from the past Blu-ray release booklet, but it's great to have it here as well. There are some very maybe not I think it's more or less intact in terms of continuity from the earlier Blu-ray. I should just point out that the earlier Blu-ray, for example, just had this little bit of the inside plastic here. It had this chapter listing. It doesn't have the chapter listing in the new UK 4HD Blu-ray combo, but that's okay. I think that's a very minor point. All in all, it remains very consistent, a very consistent carryover from the earlier release into this new iteration for 2022. Again, the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo. It is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Maybe if I could say one thing about that, again, not all 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combos will come in a digipack. Some, like this, like say other releases, not all, but some of the other 4K UHD releases from Criterion will come in the plastic, Scanovo plastic casing. I don't mind that at all, although I always enjoy the Digipack experience, and it has that wonderful package presentation that physical media offers. That's one of the great joys of physical media, I think. But there's nothing wrong with this plastic casing. I think it's great. It houses the discs fairly confidently, so no need to worry. They don't touch or anything. At least I don't think they do. That from my eye they don't touch, so that's fine. So, but it is in the plastic casing, so just to keep that in mind. So we're getting a wonderful package here from Criterion, and again, the 4K format is used exceptionally well. But that's not to say that you don't. I mean, for those who are in the Blu-ray format, that's okay. So that you're getting your money's worth. Definitely, definitely, definitely. If you haven't seen this film yet, please do. It is so worth it. This is the work for all mankind. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. So thank you so much for your time as always. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.